What happened?
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, November 17th, Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger. Councilmember Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here. Councilmember Boger mentioned a few minutes ago that he just was leaving Vancouver. I'll be here late. I see no public in the audience. We'll move on to new business, human resources, personnel policy updates. Good evening, Jeanette.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Okay, so I will have 3 policy items in front of you on December 1st. The first policy item has to do with Chapter 2A and the medical benefits. This was an oversight on my part last year when we brought the changes forward. 307, we continue to allow them 4 choices on the Kaiser plan. The baseline plan is the 250, and then we have the high deductible plan. But there are 2 richer plans above the 250 plan. Now, the 307 employees can opt for those richer plans, but they have to pay the difference between the 250 baseline and the higher cost of the richer plan, plus the premium that the employees pay on the 250 plan. So there's no material impact in terms of an additional cost to the city for employees selecting them. If they choose to want the richer plan, they pay for it and they're able to have that benefit. So, yeah.
So is that 250 then we pay, the base pay is what we're paying?
The 250 is the baseline plan. However, there is still employee cost sharing for that plan as well.
Okay.
Okay. They would just pay pay that plus the difference in the cost for the higher level richer plan. Okay. Okay, the second item has to do with 2 unpaid holidays. This came into law in Washington State early this year for public employees to provide 2 unpaid holidays, faith-based days off that employees wish to have, obviously with supervisor consent on those days. So this basically just puts into our policies what that law was, it was put into place early this year. Okay?
Is that a state law or a
State
federal?
law, state law, yeah. And the last item I have in front of you is there's been, there was obviously some recent discussion, and I think also last year, on our educational reimbursement program. When I came forward to you a couple of months ago, when we started doing the highlights in terms of the budget, it was brought up in discussion then of an interest of taking that component out of the policy and providing that that reimbursement to individuals that choose to pursue a higher level of education. And so this policy here is in response to some feedback that I received from you on that program. Any questions?
So it is out then?
No, this is up for your discussion and decision on the 1st of December. Okay, all right, thank you.
Would this be the time to ask about some of those, what have tuition costs for the city been in the past? Like,
It depends on the number of employees that elect to have the program. This year we don't have any. Didn't have any applications. Employees are required to send their applications in to me by June 30th each year, and then that informs the budget, if you will. This year we didn't have any. Last year I think the budget was $30,000, if I remember correctly. Or this year it was 30, or is it less? Jen, do you remember how much the budget was? It was more last year, less this year for
I believe it was 12,000 last year, and maybe 15 the year before.
Okay, okay. So again, that money, even though the applications come forward, that money is put into the budget still as part of your budget discussion, so it could still be not approved, if you will, even if we have the policy in place. But that's how, in terms of how the process has been working.
And was that was that a council recommended action, or was that a city thing to come up with cost saving measures for, how did it come about, I guess?
Well, it's been a couple of council members have expressed interest
Okay.
in not continuing to
Okay.
provide that benefit to
Okay.
employees, yeah.
My memory is foggy. We reimbursed half the tuition or all of it?
It depends on the program that they pursue. If we use a baseline for Washington State program. If the employee chooses to go to a private university, they would pay the difference between Washington State and that private university.
And is there a limitation on subject? Does it need to be,
Needs to be relevant,
I'm sorry?
needs to be relevant to their job or potential promotions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the draft, the red letter strikeouts, is that what is that the part where we were saying, let's remove it, and that's what exactly has been removed?
Correct,
Okay.
correct, yeah.
Making sure
All
I
right,
comprehend it all.
okay, great.
Thank you.
Please don't interpret our silence on that educational program as lack of interest.
Very good, thanks.
We'll have questions for you later.
Okay, all right, great.
Any other questions or comments for Jeanette on those? Frankly, you've got two different ways you can approach the last one, the tuition one. You can either take it out of the policies completely, which is not necessarily the recommendation of the administration. That's pretty much telling our employees we really don't care about them getting further educated, which is the farthest thing from the truth, especially when we want to keep cultivating those folks and having them stay here. The other way you can do it is just by not allocating anything in the budget, but leaving it in the personnel policies, so that if at some point in some years when things are better, you have that mechanism in there in order to do some of that or do some of the catch-up stuff that employees would care to have that is beneficial and approved through the city.
So if, in the second scenario, we would just approve it on an individual basis?
You wouldn't do anything with it, you'd just make sure that we've got a zero in that line item in the budget.
Oh.
If you don't approve it, we don't have it.
Could you approve it on an individual basis if it was unfunded, and then it would, or no, it just wouldn't?
I think it would be a very difficult one for us to do, because then you're trying to answer one employee but not another, and how does this work and how does that work? That's the reason that the program has been set up, so that they express interest in advance, so that we can evaluate that and try and figure out how we could possibly fund it if we have it, and then move forward from that point.
I haven't been privy to past conversations, but have people mentioned like a 25% or 50%, city contribution to whatever the tuition is or anything like that, or?
No, we haven't, but certainly, it could work that way potentially. Again, if we look at the funds that we could use to support that program, and I've got 6 applications, then it is probably going to be less than, if you will, than the policy. But the policy is written to support that as well, to say that we would review all applications and we would divvy those funds up that we have available to all the applicants that have applied for it.
David, go ahead.
But I was just going to say, if you leave the policy intact, in 2015, there are no expenditures for that. And during the pendency of 2015, we'd receive applications. If we receive any, the administration, as it's statutorily required, presents a budget. We'd be talking about it early in the process with you, as we do on the budget, and we would propose an expenditure that would work in a balanced budget, or not, depending upon what the issues are. We may not. The policy is very clear. There's no an employee should have no expectation that there will be support. It says it's contingent upon the ability of the budget to pay for it, but it's an available type of a thing. And I think jurisdictions that deploy this sort of a benefit often are paying less. The larger the organization, the more likely it is that you have multiple applicants, the more likely you are that you cannot fully support. We're a pretty small organization, and I think the demand for the program will be reflective of the fact that we're pretty small. We're only aware of right now, only one individual who's sort of waiting to potentially complete an undergraduate degree in a related field. But we don't know when that's going to happen. So we weren't surprised to not get any applications this year. We weren't aware that any were going to be coming anyway.
I think the goal of the program is not to fund people's degrees.
Yeah,
It's to fund job-related
professional development.
training and education. And so when you wind up funding an entire degree, I think we've missed the point of the program.
Yeah, I think in some cases it is there to fund a degree.
That's what I object to.
Yeah, that is, right now, it will, if the degree is related. So the two most recent examples of this type of an investment have been Masters in Public Administration, executive MPAs, and 2 of those have been funded over the last several years. I don't know if there was anything prior to that for a while.
And what's the commitment to the city after they receive that benefit?
If you leave employment within a year, then you have to repay a certain amount of it, and if you leave employment after a year but before 2 years, there's a lesser payback. And I think after
Percentage then.
yes,
Yeah,
and then after
right.
2 years, you don't have to reimburse anything. That's
Wow.
certainly something that could be considered as well. Different
2
communities
years.
do different things. They lengthen it out,
Here's a degree, and you only owe 2 years.
right? That's the
Military requires more.
A lot more.
A lot more.
Joyce?
Well, my feeling about it was a great deal of money was going, in a small budget, was going to 1 or 2 individuals. It wasn't spread over the employees. There weren't a lot of employees taking advantage of taking classes, and I thought that was a weakness in the program. And so that was my reticence about it, because certainly people should be able to pursue their education, but we were putting a lot of money into just 2 individuals, as I recall. And I thought, we're on a tight budget and we're running a deficit, so that was my objection.
So there's, let's say, 15,000 set aside, only one person applies, do they get all 15,000?
Depends on, it could, and it depends on the cost of the program. But again, Washington State is the baseline. So if the private costs more than that, then they will pay that difference.
The executive MPA programs are very, very concentrated, and so the cost is spread. I think it's a 2-year program, 18-month to 24-month program. I can't remember exactly what it is. Very concentrated expenditure. Someone that was pursuing an undergrad degree might do a class at a time. Sometimes there are night programs for working professionals, and it just really depends. You never know. I think our recommendation is to evaluate this on an annual basis as a function of applications and not to eliminate the policy. We think that it's part of an overall package that we offer to be an employer of choice for people, to attract people here. Certainly, it's the council's decision. You can completely eliminate it, and then it just won't be part of the annual conversation.
You can also put some other, if you would, constraints on it as well, that will pay up to 50% of, whatever qualifies, that type of thing in there.
Lengthen the commitment.
I'd like to lengthen the commitment,
Absolutely.
keep
And
the
when-
program, lengthen it.
One of the departments that I look at every time that this comes up is Jen's department right back there, where she's got some folks who are qualified for what they're doing, and some of them have some additional training. But at some point, she may want to go to 1 or 2 of them and say, we would really like to see you develop a little bit more and be more involved here in the city. To do that, you're going to need some training, and then turn around and say, but we don't have any money, you'd have to go do that on your own. It doesn't work real well that way.
That'd be a degree in accounting, for example.
A degree in accounting to get their, potentially get their CPA studies, some of those things that we look at in different ways. If it's something where she says, we have a benefit that, will help you pay for that, won't necessarily pay for it, but could help you pay for it, that's a whole lot better than nothing. Dave?
I come back to, I think the taxpayer has a vested interest in seeing to it that people are trained. And therefore, anything that's job-related in training, I think is a great idea. I don't think the taxpayers should be paying for people's degrees. People want to get a degree, we can pay for part of it that's job-related, they can pay for the rest of it. Let them make an investment in their own future. It'll mean more to them. And I say that as someone who's done that.
And there will be programs where, like an undergrad program, where there are maybe some classes that, like a history class
Don't pretend.
or a biology class you have to take, right, to get your undergraduate degree, that we could, in the policy, say, you know, it has to be class by class. In an executive MPA program, or even any MPA program, every class is related. It's very focused. It's dealing exclusively with public administration.
There again, I don't see the public paying for the degree. The question we need to sort out is, what do we pay for? To what extent do we want to support this?
Jennifer?
Yeah, I know a lot of private corporations are getting away from paying from this sort of thing. And, you know, they're encouraging people, you know, well, if you go back and get a degree, then you'll be able to be promoted. And then, of course, someone can find, you know, financial aid or a grant or something like that to pay for their education. There's a lot of ways to pay for your education already out there. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, you know, if this was an additional burden on our budget, that other cities like Camas don't offer tuition assistance. So, you know, I didn't really see, since we have a much smaller budget and, you know, we were facing deficits, why that was a necessary expense. I couldn't justify it.
Well, I didn't realize they were talking about undergraduate degrees. I was thinking, you know, an IT conference or something like that. Does the city pay for that, or
The professional
Yes.
training
Yeah,
that's,
okay.
that
Absolutely.
Alright.
is required for their certifications and things?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm.
As Dave mentioned, some of it just gets to be competitive edge. If you've got somebody that's looking at the city of Washington, we're looking at somewhere else,
Well,
and
we
they're still
have
young
good
in their
jobs
career.
here, though.
Pardon?
I mean, we offer good jobs here, though.
No doubt, no doubt.
So,
Paul?
I'm probably, of the council, the most in favor of keeping the tuition reimbursement. I think it's a good idea. You look at the two people who have been a part of this program over the past few years. The Public Works Director and his deputy both now have MPAs, which has a lot of side benefits that we sometimes don't even think about. For example, our strategic study and some of the other things that were done for the city, they were not cost-free, but because they were class projects at Portland State, they were much, much less expensive. And there are those tie-ins that are, it's difficult to put a dollar value on sometimes. But I think it's a good idea. My stepdaughter got a full ride from Pfizer for her MBA that included not only tuition, but room and board as well. And I think she had a 3-year, maybe it was a 4-year commitment. It was a 4-year commitment. And she would still be with them, except they spun off her division, so it's a separate company now. But this is something that companies do that want to develop their staff, that want to keep current, that want to kind of build on the investment that they've already made in training an employee. If you bring an employee in off the street, even if they're fully qualified by resume, it probably takes 6 months before they're a full-on employee in terms of what they contribute. And so the advantage of keeping people in employment and advancing them, I mean, there's someone I know who started out at the end of a shovel and is now a director here, and that kind of experience is truly valuable. And so I personally would support, we don't have to allocate any money this year, but I really think we should leave it in the employee manual.
Dave?
I think putting it at zero in the budget this year is a good idea, but that then gives us some time to take a look at this policy. And I go back to one basic principle, and that is, I don't want to be standing there telling the taxpayer we're funding degree programs for our employees. Training for the job? Absolutely. Degrees? You have to make a contribution yourself.
Okay, Joe?
Now, I haven't done the homework, but I don't think governmental employees should be compared to private industry when it comes to companies promoting people and giving them educations. I'm a stickler too, along the lines of taxpayer funding these types of things. I'd really like to see if you could do a survey of sorts and find out what other cities do that are similar in our size. We do that for a lot of different things. I'm looking at the wrong person.
Well,
Sorry.
we work together on that stuff.
He's usually the one that's always talking about volunteering to do this. So if we could have that information, it would certainly help make decisions on whether or not to just require more years of them, provide a percentage.
Limit to, I thought of limiting individuals to a certain amount.
A certain
as well,
amount specifically to their degree.
or just a certain amount allocated to an individual, like when they hit that number, to spread it evenly, if it was employed, I don't know.
Well, what we could do is, there are 3 pieces to the resolution that Jeanette, 3 proposed pieces to the resolution that Jeanette has for next week. 2 are critical to get passed next week. The one about the little clarification on the Kaiser plan so that it applies to our non-represented employees as well as our 307 employees. Because it's already applicable that way to the 307 employees. And then we have a mandate on the 2 unpaid holidays. We'll keep those in. We can take this part out of it and commit to you to come back sometime during the first quarter or so next year. We have time, as was mentioned, and we can give you some comparable information and have a work session to discuss different options so we can get some direction, because we're getting different direction from different folks, different ideas about this. It's clear that there'll be some, at the least, there'll be some sort of a change to the policy that will scale back the level of support in a number of different ways, or it will go away, and we can figure that out early next year.
But just to confirm, currently in your budget, there are $0
Right.
put towards this program.
That's
so
right.
it's not an issue for
0
2015 as far as.
application.
We had no applications, right? That's
So
why.
it's a wash. So it's
Joyce?
okay.
Well, I'm just going to say, while we're on a deficit budget, that we have to look at ways to keep our budget in line. Then this works out with a 0 amount and no applicants. So if there's no rush, I just feel like when we're in a deficit time, we have to be very careful about where our money's going.
Well,
When you do your list of comparables, I'd also, if it's feasible, like to see what the policy on the various military branches of service is, because I know they have training policies and they're clearly taxpayer supported. And then it would also be interesting to look at things like the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey. Do they have a policy on that?
So the federal government.
I don't think it's appropriate to look at comparables. We're trying to make a decision here on what the city of Washougal can afford. And I think the city of Washougal can afford and has a vested interest in furthering the education and training of its employees. I don't see that we have a vested interest in their degrees. That's their vested interest. And if we can contribute to that, great. Don't want to pay the whole thing. And Paul, in terms of the armed services, I retired 30 years ago this past September, so I'm not really current but I've worked for the federal government more recently than that, and I can tell you what their policy is. And that is, you can take an individual course, and they will commit to that course so long as it's job-related. They will not pay for your degree, and if they detect that you're in a degree program, they will not support any further training for you.
Any other questions or comments on anything for Jeanette?
Do we want them to do comps, or we want to not do comps? I mean, we're saving the work if we don't want it. General opinion?
She won't get to it in the next month or so.
No,
so.
that's true, but
No rush. Sure, it'd be interesting to know what other cities are doing, but definitely no rush.
I'm sorry, I just came, we're talking about a comp pay study.
For educational
The tuition
benefits.
Tuition
I
reimbursement.
was
Okay.
going to say for your income.
Okay,
Ah,
thought it was something else,
Guys.
because we're doing that in Vancouver.
Okay, thanks, Jeanette. Trevor, you've got a few items for us.
3 items this evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Professional services agreement with Columbia West Engineering.
Yes, in regards to the wastewater treatment plant expansion, contractor is mobilized and is on site, Slayton Group. Part of that is third-party testing, so Columbia West will be providing compaction testing, masonry inspection, rebar, all of those critical components of doing a wastewater treatment plant expansion. Also anchor and seismic inspection, both on site and in their lab. Typically, the arrangement in a large expansion is having a third party, so not Brown and Caldwell, who's project managing on our behalf, or Sladen Group, the general that's performing the work, having a third party conduct that testing to make sure it meets all the specs. So that's the first contract that's before you for consideration. If you have any questions on that, you'll see that at the next council meeting on consent agenda. And the next one is with CH2M Hill, same project, different core competency and scope of work in regards to electrical engineering. Brown and Caldwell does not have an electrical engineering portfolio or bench inside of their firm. We're utilizing CH2M Hill. We've used them on other projects and updating our SCADA control, supervisory control and data acquisition, which is fancy for being able to pull up assets on the computer and being able to manipulate them real time in regards to pumps and other infrastructure. So CH2M Hill will be providing that service during the wastewater treatment plant expansion. Any questions on those two in regards to the?
I'm sure it's in here. I didn't see a dollar figure on the CH2M Hill.
CH2 is right at 230,000.
Thank you.
It steps through their general
Was the last
assumptions,
one. I didn't get to
the
it.
labor and material, getting into the specifics of reconfiguration and calibration of equipment and tying in everything so it's on the same platform, if you will, in regards to our current system and how that integrates with the updated plant expansion to be able to function in regards to telemetry control. And the third item, routine business, re-upping the lease agreement in regards to the social service building. We have entered into a lease agreement with Children's Home Society in the past for an annual payment of $1. You'll see in the lease agreement, there's also other deliverables or expectations on what the city will pay for through that one-year contract. What we have proposed and what you see revised before you is to extend it out to, I believe, 2026. That coincides and parallels the restrictions in regards to the community development block grant dollars that were utilized to do the retrofit several years ago. So it does extend out just close to 11 years for this specific lease.
Would you summarize the CDBG restrictions and agreement, please?
When those funds were obligated, and I forget the specific year, I believe it was 2006, which would be a 20-year sunset. There are specific uses that are authorized inside of the obligation of block grant dollars, and being able to utilize it for public use or social service in Children's Home Society, they meet that criteria or fit that criteria for use of the facility.
So to put a fine point on it, if we stopped using it for one of the allowed uses, we'd have to pay back the money?
There'd be potential implications there. Yeah.
About how much?
I'd have to pull the figures. I know when we lifted that building and poured a foundation below it, we had multiple iterations and change orders on that specific project and worked with CDBG staff closely. I'd have to look back to get you accurate numbers. I don't want to stab at that.
Okay. My memory is ballpark between 800,000 and 900,000.
I think that's probably close. It's a pretty significant amount.
The contract, just as a clarification, the contract has a 30-day termination clause for any reason. So although it's a relatively longer type of an agreement, in our mind just for efficiencies, we are not stuck or locked in. If we ever have a problem or if the council decides to change direction with the use of the building, notwithstanding the payback implications, we can readily make a change.
The stipulations in the agreement for the money to rehab the building, do they include the other support that we give? Janitorial, HVAC, utilities, electricity, water, gas, telephone, janitorial services?
No,
So we're doing that on our own accord.
that's right. Even the amount of the lease is not stipulated, if I recall correctly. Trevor.
Right.
It's the only stipulation, the only string attached to the federal money is what the building is used for. How we deploy that use is up to us.
Yeah, it's you know, the current use of it is not in question here. The question I've got is how much support during a time of difficult budgets are we willing to give something that we don't have to give, that isn't our mission?
Do we have an estimate on what those costs are?
Yeah, it was requested last year. I pulled that this afternoon. It's right at $6,500 to $7,000 annually for the utility services that are subsidized. And the janitorial, we've also got a contract with Rice and Krupp. We have quarterly inspections on the elevator to meet state code. So depending on usage, consumption, as far as water and waste generated, it's right in between $6,500 to $7,000 annually.
Plus, you've got the $10,000 for the HVAC this year. Although you couldn't use the building without doing that rehab on the HVAC, could you?
Generally, those are going to fall on the landlord.
Okay,
Yeah, we have to we need to heat the building.
yeah, that's what I thought. So I would exclude that from consideration. So it looks like you're somewhere in the range of $14,000 to $15,000 a year in subsidies.
In regards to the utilities, it's right around $6,500 to $7,000.
But you've got a $7,500 payment
Right.
in
Right.
cash in addition.
For services, right?
Plus you've got the janitorial, utilities, various telephone and various others.
15,000 is probably an accurate estimate.
Okay.
Do we know if the Children's Home Society is fine with signing a lease of this length?
I haven't reached out to them specifically to find out if they're comfortable with a extension that encompasses 11 years or sunsets in 11 years. But with the terms being dollar annually, I would assume, even though it's speculative, that they'd be fine with that, especially with the 30 day
I mean, you
opt-out
would
on both
assume,
parties.
Obviously, but they do incur costs, as a nonprofit.
We can
And
reach out to them.
they're supported by county and state funds with their programs. But if the programs get relocated, then, that's not all on us. It's on other things that have to do with budgets that are out of our control. So
I can reach out to the program coordinator and report back on that prior to consideration before council.
Yeah,
No
we want to
problem.
make sure the council's got some level of comfort with that before we're offering that to them, but.
I think I'm the only one that's got any discomfort with it.
Okay, Joe?
I wasn't around at the time they moved in. Were there other applicants that vied for that building, or were they the one and only?
I don't recall any other applicants specifically for that facility.
Are they, we're talking about leases, they don't have a lease, and so are they guaranteed that spot if other people came knocking, offering?
They do have a.
This is a
They
lease.
do? Oh,
They do have a
This is a
lease.
lease.
Right. The,
Oh, so I misunderstood something that Jennifer asked.
No, I was just, a lot of their programs are, this is kind of a pass-through facility. They
Sure,
do
yeah.
many different things and wear many different hats, and, you know, they provide WIC and other support for programs that have nothing to do with the city per se. And so if those programs get cut, then, you know, they probably wouldn't need the space anymore. And I'm just curious to know if they even are able to sign a lease that
We
long.
can check into that, absolutely.
Michelle?
Just out of curiosity, if that building ever was needed for the development of the downtown or expansion, and you provided them a suitable alternate somewhere, would that lose the funding or grant money for that building, or?
we'd have to ask the program
Yeah.
staff at the county that implement the federal program. I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is there's a direct correlation between the funds, the construction, and the project and the use of the building. If we provide a surrogate for it that's equivalent, maybe. We
It's
can.
just 2026 seems like a really long time away. A lot could happen.
Yeah.
I'd like to address that.
The way I like to think of this is that Children's Home Society manages the building for us. There are roughly 30 agencies and NGOs that operate out of that building, but that Children's Home Society provides the front desk person, they provide management for the building, and I can't imagine that we could find somebody who would do that under contract for $15,000 a year.
Dave?
I think the advantage to the contract going until 2026, when we're released from this obligation for the money that we got, is that that guarantees us, subject to the 30-day notice, having a tenant in there that meets the requirements of the grant program, which I think is a good idea up till 2026. I don't know how we'd get out of it.
Yeah, that was the thinking. It's simply, we're under this obligation. As the councilman mentioned, I think we committed as a community to provide this type of service out of that facility, got grant money to get it started, and this just locks us in for the duration of that with a nice out clause. A 30-day any reason out clause is a very nice out clause. We have infinite flexibility, if you would, with a 30-day out clause.
As do they.
As do they. And it really was just administrative efficiency. With all of those factors given, should we every year bring the contract through, or should we just lock it in and talk about it in 2025 next, unless something changes? It's as simple as that. I think.
So Trevor, you'll check back with the
Program
Children's Home
coordinator.
Society on the farther out date?
Yep. Report back on that.
Okay.
I have one quick question.
Yep.
And it's just because we, you know, have an issue or have had an issue with some homeless, you know, people, you know, out in front of City Hall, and there are other places within our parks that they kind of set up camps and things like that. I'm just curious to know if that building can be used for overnight stays.
I'm not certain if they provide overnight stays. I know they have services during regular business hours. I can check with the coordinator when I reach out
I
to
didn't even
find
know
out
if
exactly.
it was even, you know, able to be
Feasible for it, for the building?
Yeah,
You know,
that way.
I don't believe so, but
They
that's,
have
I don't believe
facilities
they
for
have
that.
bathing facilities there,
Yeah.
for example.
yep.
We could probably make it work there, perhaps with some improvements, maybe some minor improvements.
Security.
But we leased that, like, as the councilman mentioned, they sort of manage that facility, and we haven't included that in the portfolio. That I don't think it would prevent them from offering that service. They'd have to check with us first. It's a possibility.
Yeah, because it just says, Washougal Social Services Center. It says, will use and occupy the premises for operation of the Washougal Social Services Center. Authorized uses of the tenants and no other purposes. So that seems pretty vague. Social services is kind of all encompassing.
That's right.
So.
It's very broad to be flexible.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think that's why it would be possible to do that if the facility could accommodate it, our zoning regs and all that stuff, we can make it work. So I think it's a
Just
possibility.
curious, it's just more for my curiosity.
Any other questions for Trevor on any of the three items? Okay. Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks.
Dave, you've got a PSA as well.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. Council, as you might recall from our budget conversations, when we presented the recommendations of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, one of the recommendations of the committee that is included in the budget is $20,000 for professional services for tourism support. So next week on the consent agenda, we're proposing a professional services agreement between the city and Renee Carroll Consulting, who has and is functioning as our tourism support consultant this year. The contract that the Lodging Tax Committee recommended and council approved for last year was right around $10,000, just a little bit more than $10,000. The committee wants to invest more in this area and is recommending to the council to invest more in this area. So this one is a not to exceed $20,000. And so it's a continuation of everything that's been going on this past year, and then it will be enhanced, and we'll try to do some more things to continue our tourism program.
You're saying it was at 10,000 and now they're saying no more than 20.
Correct. We reviewed this with the council at a workshop where we presented all the recommendations of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. This was one of them.
Dave?
As the chairman of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, however reluctantly I may be, the committee looked at this and recommends to the council your support. It makes sense. We've got the money built up. We've got about, 3 years' worth that we can do at the increased rate before we have to cut back.
Right.
And we're hoping that that will increase the income from the hotel motel tax. And therefore, we're looking at it as an investment to improve that aspect of our revenue stream.
What are the deliverables on this, or what's our measurement for, if there's success on this? Is there a website, is there signage, is there a certain amount of revenue we're looking at to make sure they're doing their job? I mean, do we have any kind of measurement or what we're expecting to get out of this or from this?
Let me take a crack at that, and then you can fill in the details. The best measure of it is the increase in the hotel motel tax. We haven't set a goal. We figured we'd look at it and say, is that enough? Did you jump high enough? In terms of evaluating the rest of it, it's a little difficult to evaluate anything that would give you outcomes. The rest of what you'd be doing is evaluating inputs, and that's an exercise in futility.
That's a question. Before you fill in.
It's up to the mayor. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I'm always looking at the wrong person tonight.
Is there another question?
Yeah.
Let's have Dave finish up on this one then. I'd rather.
No, on this topic.
Okay.
So is this the department that will do things like promote events like the paddle board event?
Correct.
So you're going to talk about that. That's a great measurable, in my opinion. Events, successful events, drawing people in. Of course, then people would stay at the motel, use our restaurants, etc.
The committee allocated $600 for a paddleball
Pickleball.
or pickleball tournament, and $6,000 to support the film festival coming to Washougal. And everything else is somewhere in between.
Right. And those are all listed in your budget. The ones that the lodging tax, the applications that we already received that are recommended for approval, we presented to you at our workshop. There was a list of several projects, and those are listed specifically in your budget. We have not adopted a formal set of metrics. The state law requires that we give information back to the state around estimates. It's estimates of people that come from 50 or more miles away as a function of the events that you're holding. So we always have an eye to, are people coming from outside of the region to the events? And you can do surveys, you can do different things at the gate to try to get an estimate of that, but it's an estimate. But informally, the things that we're looking at in terms of Renee's efficacy as our consultant, are we having more events? Is there more interest? Are more people applying for our funds?
And are they successful?
And are the events successful, and are the events growing from year to year? And right now, the evaluation informally along those lines is yes, 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 and yes. And because of that, the committee wanted to reinvest and, in fact, enhance the investment. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to the budget in this account, and the goal is to support the level of spending that we are proposing in this year's budget because of enhanced revenue through more people coming. At some point, there's a limit to what you can get because we only have so many beds here for people to pay taxes on. So I suppose even a longer term one would be, ooh, we have another new hotel or an expansion to the existing one.
So the 20,000 wasn't, it included the event support that we had talked about before. It wasn't just solely her.
Oh, no,
Okay.
no, the budget,
All right.
the budget for the appropriations proposed in the
Are included in
hotel
that
motel
figure.
tax, it's on the order of
$60,000.
$60,000. I can't remember the exact number, but a number of events, some advertising money, and then this 20,000, and then a placeholder of quite a lot so that other people can come and apply, and then the committee makes the decision about whether to spend it
We
or
still
not.
have 15,000 remaining that's not committed to events, so that people can
That's in
come
the
in
budget.
later in the year and request it.
This is a fund, you can only spend it on the support of tourism activities. Some large,
But I just thought the 20,000 was for her contract.
it is.
Oh, it
is
is.
for her
Okay.
contract.
Just for
Yeah.
her contract, right.
She's the prime mover in this.
No.
But to show you the difficulty of evaluating, the figures that were presented at the committee meeting on attendance and where they came from, we were guessing about whether or not people were actually coming from out of town. We estimated it based on other information we got. We didn't specifically get that information. People were coming from not only out of town, but 50 miles away. And that's one of the requirements to,
We do get some of that information back from the individual events themselves.
but it didn't specifically include that information. There was an estimate of that.
It's estimates in a
Right,
little bit.
Everything's estimates.
Someone walks in the gate and you say, hey, welcome, pay your $4.
You don't look familiar.
Where'd you come from?
That's why people ask our zip code all the time, isn't it?
Yes, yeah,
So
so,
it's that simple.
right.
But some of the zip codes were from out of state. When you say, where are you from? Some people say, I'm from Florida. That's where they were born.
Which is
Right.
awesome, that's what we want.
Right,
Yeah.
but they might live down the corner. yeah.
So you can see the problem in evaluating the inputs. And so by focusing on the outcomes, the increase in the taxes, which is measurable, we were already doing that measurement.
Right.
We can determine whether or not it's a success.
Kind of a good little analogy to make is larger communities that have more robust revenues from hotel motel tax typically will support a visitors and convention bureau. And so largely visitors and convention bureaus are funded by hotel motel tax, not exclusively, but largely. For a community of our size with much more modest revenues from hotel motel tax, Renee is kind of our visitors and convention bureau, if you would, and they go out and they drum stuff up, promote the area.
Joyce?
Did the committee talk to the Best Western? Because that's basically where the revenue's coming
They're
from.
on the committee.
They're on the committee.
They are? So, yeah, okay. And so they say that their occupancy is up.
Yeah, they actually had set records July, August, and September of this year for occupancy so far, so. Brent?
Well, in my checkered past, I've gotten some experience in the hotel business because of the Vancouver Hilton. And I know that hotels keep track of where their guests come from, and I just wonder how, it's kind of a trade secret issue, and they may not want to share that data, but I wonder how forthcoming the Best Western would be about that in these committee meetings.
Well, I think that's a good question. I don't know that either Chris or Harry, either one would care. It's a different question than what we're looking for here. No matter what, at the end of the day, as we expend these dollars and as they're approved by both the committee and the council to be spent, at the end of the day, we still have to have an after-event report that Jennifer has to have available to the auditors to be able to look at and say, yes, you're expending these appropriately, you're doing what the program is allowable to do, and you're not exceeding those amounts coming from those taxes. And we've still got to make that case no matter what. So, in the case of the hotels, it's just a question of, if you're at 100% every single weekend, is that any part of that because of what we're doing, or just because you're always at 100%? And it would be trying to figure out, now obviously they know some of that, some of it just
And I can say the hotel
anecdotally.
business is generally up
Yep.
the last few years, so.
Tourism is up.
Right.
We could certainly ask them for the data. It's not directly correlable to the impact of our events, but it's a data point to have.
And I can also, some of the discussions that we've had with Renee that have helped to put together this PSA and some of those additional dollars is, Renee, let's have you go out to the two hotels and find out, are there dates when traditionally they just aren't as busy as what they could be or anywhere near it. Let's find out what those are. Then let's find out what other communities do, if anything, during those times of year. And is there any possibility that we can create some things that don't exist now that will help them in that, and also create some things for community events during that time that maybe aren't traditional, and that's okay. But it does help them, and it does help put dollars back into these coffers. The $20,000 that Renee, the $20,000 that's allocated here, there's a lot of different things that go into that. She's kind of sort of, I don't want to call her our coordinator for events, but she kind of is. One of the things that's helpful is that she does some contract work for both the schools and the Port District as well, and for QUITA. So she's kind of one of those only cogs in the entire community that's in the middle of all of those, doing some of their press relations, some of their public outreach. But we also give her some direction to assist some of those events if there are things that they're just not sure where to go to or how to get a hold of something, or they've got half an idea and they need to get it the rest of the way put together, and to be able to assist them in doing that. A lot of it's the PR. A lot of it's just doing whatever she can do through her social media and outreach into the other media outlets to make sure that those events are as attended as they can be, and try and make them as successful as they can be. And then the other part is helping to literally develop some events that are maybe our own, and bring those along and find ways for them to do them that still keep her within that $20,000 range. So regardless what she's doing, it all melds together, and none of it can exceed that $20,000. So, Dave?
The committee wanted you to know two things. One was that they requested your support for this year. And the second thing was that we'll take a look at this at the end of the year and see if we want to do it again next year.
So she's basically going to bill us at $55 an hour based on her service.
That's what she does now.
Yeah. Has she ever coordinated anything during the time of the motocross events? Because they are a big draw to our community, but I know they're outside the city. It's not city business, but we've already got people here. Does anybody know if she's done anything specific?
She did outreach to that event. I wasn't part of those conversations, but I don't even know how responsive they were to her.
What do motocross people do on their off time? boot nannies or
They stay up there.
they stay up there.
right.
They don't
They
come
can't.
down.
Except for those that come down to the hotels
Yeah.
and then go back up. And that's one of the difficult things. We have 20,000 people that are moving through town.
They're just.
Keywords are
massive.
moving through.
Right.
Some, thankfully, are always gonna stop and they know, hey, you know what? I don't have to gas up. I don't have to buy all our beverages and everything before we get up there. We're coming from Salem. We're coming from Seattle. We talked to a number of couples and kids and families afterwards last year. You know, it's an international race, so they're coming from
Right.
everywhere. Plus, the track itself is so well known that people are coming there that maybe it's on their bucket list. They want to be there once, but they're hitting Safeway. They're hitting, you know, the mini markets and that kind of stuff going through. They're buying ice. They're buying gas. They're buying. So you've got that amount. But the reality is that road is what it is. And it doesn't matter if you go over the top or you go anywhere else, you've still got to, at some point, you've got to intersect for 2 or 3 miles, and it is what it is, so.
So I'm just thinking,
Once people
street
get there,
fairs.
they're staying there.
You know, what kinds of things as they're passing through can we do that she should be considering?
The
Some
Hearth
inspiration
Restaurant-
there.
The Hearth Restaurant, that weekend, for the first time in history, had a waiting line.
It's a good problem.
Pendleton probably gets some of their business also.
Just for the natural turnoff. Yeah, we could certainly, one of the things that we have not done, which we should probably at least look at, is for that weekend or other weekends, and keep in mind, that's just one event
That's
they
just
do
one
up there.
year, yeah.
They have a bunch of
We
others.
go all the time.
One of the things that we have not approached in the past, and I don't know whether folks have come to the city to ask, is to allow some additional signage, sandwich boards, that type of stuff on 32nd and on River Road during those weekends. Right now, we tell businesses you can have signage at your business, and we'll put up signs that say, "Welcome to," but we don't necessarily encourage anybody to put out a sign that says, "Hey, pizza,
Safeway.
300 feet down here. Hot, you can get it to go," to get those people to peel off. It's a weekend by weekend deal. Sometimes they can be successful, sometimes they can just be a fight for who gets to that corner first.
It's been on our radar, not a lot of success coordinating with the actual event. But yes, it's something we want to do. I have a colleague in another part of the state that was asking us about this type of a thing. They've got, I'm not sure if it's bikes or cars, they've got a track conditional use permit. It's out of town. People will go right by, but not into the town to do it. And so we just both say the same thing. Yeah, we're going to try to figure out a way to make them stop and drop some of their resources in the town on
You
their
gotta
way
attract
to
them.
their destination, you know. A
Car-
traffic stop that where you're required to pull.
Traffic accident.
He's put it before we stop somewhere that never existed before and sell sodas at the stop sign.
Close
There's
the
stuff
road.
out there.
We're always,
Close the one.
we're open to ideas. On the Hoffman side, certainly, you know, one of the things that they're looking at is they want everybody to stay up there. They've got concessionaires that are selling food that they want to keep happy. They've got their own beer gardens that profit them, everything. They've got their own campgrounds that profit them, so it's not to say they aren't reasonable people. They realize that there's a community right
business.
at the bottom of their hill, so maybe there are some things that,
No, he's gotta do
We
something as
possibly
they're
could do.
going out.
There are highway signs on 14 that list names of restaurants or lodging or even, there.
yeah, and then we have additional stuff inside the city
Yeah.
as well that we've put up.
Once you get on.
Not all of our businesses
They're not
avail
on the
themselves
14.
of the program. It's a state Department of Transportation program. You have to pay to be on it. And not everybody thinks that's a good use of their advertising dollars
Or qualifies to be on it,
or qualifies, yeah.
traveler services. Any other questions or thoughts on the contract for Renee? Okay. Jennifer?
Oh, look at the stack.
Oh, good Lord.
That's just in case you have questions. I'm prepared.
You are.
Some for you.
You don't have it all memorized? You seem to always just come up with
That's just in
numbers.
case my memory fails.
You're
Holy
amazing.
smokes, is there a test on Friday?
There is.
Open book, though.
Yeah. So I don't have a presentation. I do have some handouts for you. The first thing I wanted to go over and hand out is with the, I guess I just go that way. We weren't anticipating the advanced refunding of the downtown bonds, so we didn't have the transaction in the 14 budget. So we need to do a budget amendment to record the transaction. Even though we don't ever actually get the money, we have to record it in and expend it out. So since we were doing kind of a true-up budget ordinance for that, there was a few other accounts we thought we would clean up as well. So I thought I'd go through those very quickly. They're all pretty
Issue of the tissue.
pretty low-key. So what you have in front of you is the draft new ordinance that'll be before the council on December 1st. The original budget ordinance for comparison, and then a summary of, that's funny, there's a little thing copied on there, the changes. So I highlighted the 4 on the front. The first one is the perpetual care fund. We had done the niche wall purchase in 13, and we didn't release the retainage to the company until 14. So it was just a little bit had carried over between years. So again, it wasn't very material. It's only $1,600. But since we're doing the ordinance, we figured we would include that. So we don't have to include it as a note in our budget or in our financials. Then the next one would be the downtown fund, which is they had estimated 3.7 million, so that was the number I used, or maybe the ordinance says not to exceed 3.7. So I just added the revenues and expenditures on either side to that, and then do the actuals, which should be a little bit less. The next fund is the 406 Water Sewer Construction Reserve Fund. We had the West Side Wellfield project is a Public Works Trust Fund loan that wrapped between years as well. We had expected it to be done in 13. Some expenditures transferred over to 14. So we just needed to record the revenue and expense on that. And then with 410, it's the actual payment for the Public Works Trust Fund loans. They billed us for, we don't have an amortization debt schedule yet for the new loans because we were still drawing down on them, so we didn't know what those payments would be. So we've made the payments, but it has put that fund over budget. So we just need to wrap that up since we're doing the ordinance. Those roll up in our financial statements, so it wouldn't necessarily be an audit issue. But since we're doing the cleanup budget, I figured we'd make it pretty for the auditors. Pretty standard stuff. It'll be before you on the 1st, and since it's just a budget amendment, we don't need a public hearing.
Questions for Jennifer?
Brings us to the really fun stuff. That's mine. I made copies of the budget for everyone again. Yay, we like paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll send 5 that way.
Has it changed?
It has. So what had happened, I'll keep my hair.
Oh.
Sorry. We were debating on the abatement fund. The original budget had it as a line item in the police department, but then that wouldn't let the fund balance carry forward every year. So what we did is we went ahead and made it its own fund, which pushed everything off a number. So you'll see that that is a new fund on page 45. And then on the ordinance, you'll see a new line, which is on page 3. So that way we can track that, it can carry forward, and we don't have to reappropriate anything every year. It'll just be its own fund, and we can track it pretty easily. You'll notice it's an 00. So we labeled it 003 because for our financial statements, it'll roll up into the general fund because it doesn't qualify as its own technical type of fund. But for the budget purposes and for our tracking purposes, we can keep it as its own fund.
Could you clue me in what kind of nuisances we're talking about here?
For instance, the house that we had to go through the court system to be able to demo and take down. So they're code enforcement type issues to where we have to get a court order in order to alleviate the issue
I
with the
suspected
owner
as
law.
much. Thank you.
Are there
So,
others?
so the budget changed, but it really didn't change. This was already appropriated.
Right.
It just moved it in, off of a line item in the police budget to its separate fund. Switched all the pages on you, and so she reprinted it.
Thanks, Jen. Are there other things besides houses that are nuisances?
That I don't know.
It could
My
be,
neighbor's dog.
could be a commercial, could be a commercial
That wouldn't
building.
fall under that.
Typically, it's dangerous building abatement. It could be some other sort of mess, if that's the technical term.
Structure.
Could be junk.
Junk in the yard.
Right. Yeah, and it's a best practice to have a fund that's intact, that lives from year to year, as opposed to every year going, oh, we got to make sure we have money in this line item. It just sits there. It theoretically, over time, will be replenished because there's a lien on the property when we do the abatement. So we have perfected, I don't know if it's fully perfected yet, but we are in the process of perfecting or have already perfected a lien on the one property where we did the abatement. And it has superior position.
Except for taxes.
Except for, okay, so the county goes first, and then us. So we're hopeful. Well, I won't get into the details of that one. So
Does that mean we could actually acquire that piece of property then, or is there any likelihood of that, or?
this fund is to abate the nuisance, so that we can be nimble and we're ready to abate the nuisance. In terms of acquiring any property, we can certainly enter into a real estate transaction with anyone
Okay.
to acquire, but we wouldn't use these funds for that. We'd have to find funds for it.
I'm just wondering what is anticipated to happen to that piece of property.
Well, it's in a neighborhood. It's a piece of residential property. Ideally, someone would build a house there, or if it was, oh, it's commercial? Oh, but there's houses all around? Okay. So it is one of the parts of our community that it looks residential in character, but we've zoned it into commercial, looking toward the future. So it's probably too small to do anything of significance commercially, unless somebody bought up a few more. Can they put a house there?
Within a year, yep.
If it sits vacant for more than a year without a variance of some kind, they couldn't build a house.
And they are aware of that as part of the lien.
Okay.
This particular one, there's one of the neighbors that's already expressed interest in purchasing the property once it was cleared off.
Where is this property?
It's on 29th, just
29th.
between E and F. It's the other one that's a bare piece of property.
Right.
Paul?
I'm just going to say, generally speaking, these are due on sale liens, not foreclosable liens. And on the other hand, the amount of the lien, even if 3 years of taxes were not paid or 5 years were not paid, which is typically how long it takes the county to foreclose their tax lien, that the value of the property would still be significantly greater than the taxes and our lien. So at the sheriff's sale, somebody would bid on it.
Unless there's debt, well, actually, we'd be above the debt mortgage on it.
Yeah, we're, liens come in order, called seniority, and the most senior lien is property taxes. And we're basically in second place behind the tax lien, which puts us ahead of any mortgage or mechanics lien or anything else.
I was surprised last week we were in AWC legislative committees and committee meetings. And I'm not sure that that's true, that we'd be in second position. The gentleman who's the lobbyist, the government strategies, anyway, for the city of Tacoma, they have millions of dollars in an account, the same as we do here for the, few tens of thousands of dollars we have. They have millions of dollars in that account. And he mentioned that they've tried to introduce legislation in the last 2 years that would give the cities the superior lien ability, and the mortgage bankers have shot it down every single year. So they aren't going to reintroduce it this year. I have an appointment to speak with one of our local community bankers who's now on that board and was just up in Seattle at the same time I was for community banking meetings, and see what it is that's an objection from them, if it's, you know, just that they need a cap on that of what the lien's gonna be, or, you know, if they have to be consulted on what's happening, or that type of thing.
There are some that are superior to mortgages.
Well, and it was interesting that somebody mentioned, and I couldn't catch all of the stuff that was going back and forth. It sounds like there's something that the counties have the ability to do that the cities don't. And it sounded like that was a superior lien ability, and also in order to get, I don't know what you would call it, summary judgment on these types of things under a certain threshold that the county is allowed to do, but cities currently are not allowed to do. And so they were trying to get those married up. And the community banker said, well, we wouldn't have allowed that either, but we didn't know about it when it went through, so we're not about to let you guys do it, so, anyway.
Well, they're actually part of the cause of the problem for some of the properties.
There you go.
You know,
Yeah, they're not taken care of,
yeah.
the vacant properties.
Well, we certainly have had another property in town that we finally went through and had some work done on it that I believe the bank ended up, the one that we had the homicide, suicide, arson on, that I think we ended up whole out of all of that for all the bills that we sent through. The bank still retains the property. It's still a struggle with Sherry and who actually holds that now to keep that thing kept up and everything else. At one point, our liens and our fines against them, if we actually levied them by the day, everything else were like $300,000-$400,000. It was just a stupid number. So we finally got it cleared off, got it done. They paid our reasonable bills, and we went on with life from there. But it's still trying to find who actually has that. So in some cases, while we don't want to go out and do cleanup of people's properties, there are some of them that it would certainly be easier if there were a little bit more flexibility in what we could do and lean it. Not to say that we're going to get in the landscape business and go around and do that every month for somebody here and there, but for some of those that get to be absolute eyesores in a neighborhood that we just can't get any resolution to, sometimes it's nicer just go in, clean it, get it done once, and lien the property and move on from there, and hope something else happens with it.
Yeah, please don't interpret the establishment of this fund as an indication that we're changing our enforcement approach. Is simply that we found ourselves in the unfortunate situation of needing to do an abatement for the health and safety of the community, and in so doing, we realized, oh, we don't have a dangerous buildings abatement fund. That is a best practice to have in any community that's starting to have some aging stock. And let's make sure we go ahead and get that set up as part of this next budget process. We hope we don't have to use it.
Where's the money coming from?
General fund.
The general fund.
Okay.
How
To
did we come up-
establish it.
How did we come up with that figure? Just a random number?
Actually, we came up with 50,000, and we've moved it since then as council have come up with other things that we needed to do. We've just kind of adjusted, that's one of them that we've adjusted a little bit here and there just to keep ourselves in balance for the proposed budget.
That would take care of two-ish significant abatements.
The one that we most recently had was, what, 15,000?
I think the lien against the property is almost 20.
Okay.
It includes some staff time, not just the contractor, the
Right.
demo contractor.
20,000 does?
Right.
The demo was about 12.
Yeah. And it, it wasn't a huge house, so it's not a random number. It's
Right.
roughly 2 or so abatements.
And just the opportunity for questions or anything on the budget.
Just for clarification, there's an intent to adopt the budget tonight and come back and amend it? Are we just going to?
No, the first thing that Jen went through is an amendment to the 2014 budget.
Oh, that's 2014.
Just to book the GO refunding.
Okay.
On the agenda tonight, it was on last week. Public hearings for the 2015 budget were held last week. The council tabled consideration of the ordinance until tonight. So at the meeting tonight, the ordinance is before the council for adoption of the 2015 budget.
And I guess this is a good time to state my predicament here. last week I had business in Washington. Tonight, I thought I was covered for my other employer. But both the attorneys that might be able to cover for me tonight are sick today, so I have to be back in Vancouver at 7. I won't be able to vote on this tonight. I have no significant issues with this budget, and if I were here, I would vote for it.
Jennifer?
Thank you. Several days ago, Joyce pointed out that the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society Professional Services $5,000 for the cat shelter for the 2014 budget wasn't included for 2015, and I was just curious to know why that was.
Was or was not?
It's not included. It's,
What page are you on?
I'm on page 26.
26?
Uh-huh.
For the shelter or for the spaying program?
Well, for the spay and neuter program for the cat shelter.
We didn't include it. It's sounding like perhaps we had a misunderstanding as a team. We thought the council was looking at a one-time intervention in the community with those funds. It's not too late to adjust the budget if the council wants it to be an ongoing program.
We are still trying to get it paid for this year. They've not figured out a way for us to do that, or haven't invoiced us, or kind of like,
But I
let us
think-
come up with a program
I
on
think
that
we'll
one.
have that resolved next week.
The current individual is in Singapore and has been for a couple weeks. They've had a couple turnovers in the president, I believe, position, and so we've been trying. I know that they have been doing the program with the expectation of receiving the funds. It's just getting all the paperwork and documents in a row.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, I had placed a call over to, I can't remember her name now, the new president of the cat shelter, and I left a message if they don't want to get the forms together, because like Chief Mitchell was saying, he's been trying to get an agreement, and they haven't been cooperative for whatever reasons. There's no reason for us to give them the money if they aren't going to use it or need it.
I would say,
Follow procedure.
I would say that where that is at today as we speak it's going to be tightened up and completed here within the next couple of weeks. We have a draft professional services agreement. We have pretty tight language around the services that they provide, and we have a promise from her that upon her return from Singapore, and this hasn't been waiting because she's been on a trip here these last couple of weeks. This has been an ongoing frustration, and it has been frustrating. But I want to be fair to the organization. There's all those issues, their volunteers, all of that. My sense is that, yes, it took longer than we would have liked for this to get nailed down. I believe it will be nailed down here very quickly, and that shouldn't necessarily be a reason for the council not to think about the program.
Yeah, I would like us to have it. I mean, I would like that money to be available. I just would like them to be utilizing it. I mean, we voted for it to help the community, and I want them to be using it to help the community with these cats.
I would not like to have the community have this program. We're spending $5,000 on it. There's no way to evaluate the success of the program. And based on that, I think it's highly unlikely that we're going to have any significant impact. And so I think we're throwing money at a problem in order to be throwing money at a problem, to look like we're doing something. And I don't like that approach. So I am not in favor of the feral cat program. The feelings of my colleague over here to the contrary, she's a lot more attuned to this sort of thing in the community than I am.
And so am I.
Definitely.
I missed that, but I would support restoring that money to the budget.
Absolutely.
Hi, Joe.
We had a discussion about the procedure that they follow, and it seemed sort of backwards to our understanding. You want to talk about that, since you're the one that talked to me? I mean, you're the one that had that thought and shared it with me.
Just briefly, they are spending some money spaying male cats, And I think that's a total waste of money because there will always be another male cat available to any female in heat. And therefore, unless you focus on the females, you're not going to have any impact at all.
Davey, neuter male cats, you spay.
You spay females. That's right.
Thank you.
Unless you take care of.
On the other hand, even if you spay the female cats, and as I understand it, you eliminate something like 8 or 9 litters on average by spaying a female cat if you catch them early enough. It's just not likely, in my opinion, that $5,000 is going to have a significant impact on the program. So thank you for bringing that up. If we are going to have this program, I would suggest that we direct them to neuter or to spay female cats and not bother with neutering the males. It's a waste of time.
So do we have reports on what exactly they're doing?
We have had in the
The
past.
process?
I-
Because I totally agree with
me
him that
right now, but
neutering males is of no value when it's the females that have the litters.
The proposed scope of services for the $5,000 is on a per cat basis. And they outline what their costs are, and they'll give us the invoices from the vet. It includes both sexes of cats.
And that's what I'm asking us to direct not happen. I want to focus on where the litters are coming from, because there's always another male cat out there. There's always another tomcat available.
Well,
Couple of comments. One of the problems, of course, is that short of a very detailed examination, it's hard to tell whether the cat's male or female. It's not like a dog. And so you have to trap the cat and then do an examination. And what do you do at
That's
that
not
point?
true.
After you've gone to all the trouble to capture the cat, you're gonna let it go? And then the other thing is that
Yes.
actually the programs that I'm aware of that do this in various places like Pasadena, California, and some of the others, is that they definitely do both. And they have strong reasons for doing both. I couldn't tell you what they are, but if you really want to know that, I'll talk to the people that I know in Pasadena and find out.
Michelle?
Yeah, so these are just strays that come into the, and they take care of all the strays that come in.
Feral cats.
That aren't fixed.
Feral cats.
Yeah,
So
Feral cats.
male, female, they're all fixed, that are stray.
That's our
Okay.
understanding at this
Would
point.
you define feral cat,
One that is homeless.
homeless
Homeless
cats?
cat. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. A wild cat.
Yeah. Teresa?
Do they have a program for sick cats? I mean, where do you take a sick cat? I noticed doing the finances, we had a bill for the euthanasia of a cat that
Two
evidently
dogs.
went through animal
Dogs.
control.
The animal control program, if they come across a sick or injured animal, it does go to a vet, and then if it has to be euthanized, dog or cat, we pay for that. But that's separate from the feral cat program,
Okay.
that's just through the animal control program.
I can say that in the scope of services, in looking at their itemization of what a typical bill from the vet will be for a cat who's going in to be fixed,
Okay.
there is some, I don't know if you'd call it preventive care or well care. So if the cat not only has not been fixed yet, but also it maybe needs to be vaccinated so that it doesn't bring diseases out into the community, or there's some other issue going on, fix the cat and release this cat, or try to adopt the cat out. I think ultimately they're trying to adopt cats out. So part of it does have a little bit of care.
It's
There's a
the
care
shots
element,
probably,
right?
yeah.
So the 5,000 isn't exclusively for, it is mostly for, but isn't exclusively for, because on a case-by-case basis, there might be a little bit of the bill that takes care of some care.
20-point inspection?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Now, spay and neuter was in the 20. Other questions?
So the only thing I would say, obviously it's not unanimous here in the council, and you don't take votes here, but just based on some of the commentary, it sounds like this is something the council would probably want to do later this evening. What we were planning to do, kind of anticipating this, is to quickly adjust the cover page to the ordinance. This dangerous buildings abatement fund will say 40 and not 45. And then the animal control line item will be $5,000 higher. And we will probably, based on this conversation, probably try to do that in the break. So that's not an amendment that the council necessarily has to make. It'll be embedded.
I will bring it up as an amendment. Vote up or down, either way.
Well, in that case, why don't I just make it a separate item for you if you choose to take
Is
the
he talking
budget
about
up?
the cat thing, or is he talking about the,
Works for me.
I was talking about the
Another
cat,
okay.
5,000.
Taking the funds out of one and putting them in the cat thing.
Right.
As I've done once or twice in the past, it never sits well with me if
No,
you've got to vote no on a $53 million budget because of $5,000 of items, so I don't have a problem taking a couple of those and setting them separately
And I would never do
for up or
that.
down votes, so
I'll
that
offer
you
an
can feel
amendment.
better about doing that side, so
I've never done that to you, and I won't.
I appreciate that. It's just good, I think it's just good for the community. You know, if we've got a $53 million budget and there's 2 or 3 questions out there on a couple of items that add up to $10, $15, $100,000, I hate to see you have to vote no on the budget just because of those items.
Actually, as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, I had a dozen of them, but I want you to know that your budget director resolved all but 3 of them,
She's pretty good.
just like that.
She's pretty good. Other questions on this item? All right, Joe.
Well, Paul volunteered to call Pasadena, but I would think we should just speak to the people that do our project. Do you know any more about it, Jennifer, or anybody at the table?
What I was going to find out about is trap and spay, and I just heard now that that's not what we're talking about. In Pasadena, what they're doing is trap, spay, and release.
I'm not sure that they're out proactively trapping feral
Okay.
cats. I don't know. Jennifer, do you know if that's what they're doing?
Here?
I don't think we're paying for them to trap, but honestly, I
They
don't know
get
where
calls, though. They get calls about
Colonies of them.
families of cats. They're just having multiple litters and they're kind of hanging out in places, and they do go out and trap them.
So then we are paying for some of that.
For your action tonight, it's kind of a non-issue though, because we've still got the professional services agreement for that portion of it that we've got to bring forward to you anyway, so all that's still in the works.
We wouldn't necessarily, it's a $5,000 program. Normally, that's an administrative function, but we can, if there's concern about the precision and the scope, we can bring it back to the council so they can choose.
Please.
Please do, yes.
We can do that. Okay.
Are you talking about a budget amendment after the whole budget is passed?
No.
The
The
PSA.
agreement, oh,
The
oh,
PSA
okay.
would only be for 5,000, because we keep it separate from the bigger one, the
Right.
dog one.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So tonight, the budget will or will not include the 5,000 for feral cats?
I'm going to leave that, I'm going to bring that up as a vote prior to the budget, if you care to bring the budget up, and let you vote on that one separately, at which point we'll either include it or not include it.
Got it.
So we won't make a change to the
But at
budget.
least you know that the dangerous building abatement fund is where it'd come from if council decides to appropriate $5,000 for it. One will come down and one will get funded. Okay, any other items for Jennifer? Any items from the public?
Well, I just have a quick question.
Yes. Hi, Diana.
I'm just wondering where the oil train resolution has got. So I know you were forming a committee.
Yes, we met and I haven't gotten to drafting it yet. I've started to draft it actually, but I haven't completed it. It will address safety, traffic, intervention in the FSEC process, the disproportionate impact of the oil trains at Washougal, and crowding out other train traffic. Right?
Right. So coming back to us soon?
Yes, I hope to have that done in a week or so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, with that, we will stand adjourned from this meeting and back here at 7 o'clock for our regular council meeting.